Welcome, beautiful people of all ages, shapes, and colors, to another episode of the HOFers podcast, where we encourage you to stick to the basics. I'm one of your co-hosts, TV, aka TV on basketball, alongside my co-host Jay, aka Knockdown Jay. How's it going, my guy?
It's going good, man. We took a little bit of a hiatus for a second. Nothing was going on in the world of the NBA, but look, we've revamped some stuff. We talked over some cool ideas, and we're back, TV. We're back.
We're back. I mean, of course, we got some other stuff going on in our lives. My guy, as you can see with his new setup, that he's like in a new place, which means we're going to be starting to crank up some stuff over the next month or two, especially with the NBA season coming in about a month or so away, which is absolutely fantastic. And you can expect to see, of course, some more off-season content throughout the month of September and all that good stuff on this podcast. And we're starting it back up today because it's been like, what, 2 weeks, man? I think it's like been like 2 weeks and a bit.
Been a little minute.
It's been a minute, but we're back, and we have some great topics to talk about today. Talking about some Hall of Fame odds, finally finishing off our positions list with the top 5 centers, and of course we got the quiz and the draft at the end, like we always do for these episodes. But before we get into all that, we do have to plug our socials. Remember to follow our individual socials at the Knockdown J, at TV on Basketball, down in the description below to our TikTok, Instagram, all that good stuff. In terms of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, remember to follow us on TikTok and Instagram for the best daily NBA content. You get to see some of Jay's content, which has been sprinkling in here and there, but he's been on the move, which makes sense. But I'm on episode 30 of the Hit Your Free Throws NBA 2K universe. That series is still going on, which is going to be continuing. Even though 2K24 is coming out the next week, I'm still going to be finishing off this series before the end of the season. And then besides that, you're going to see all the other good stuff, which is going to come on throughout the regular season, of course. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you will not miss an episode. And if you're listening to on any of the podcast networks, Spotify or Apple, just make sure to subscribe, leave a review, all that good stuff. Jay, you ready to get into some basketball talk? It's been a minute.
Yeah, man. I've been fiending 2 weeks off. I'm ready to talk hoops, bro.
Yes. And in today's episode, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Yes, FIBA's going on, but we're going to be talking about quite a bit about that in the next episode, so be on the lookout for that, especially with the knockout rounds happening now. But we're going to be talking about the Hall of Fame, and not with the guys that just got inducted, even though, congratulations to the Dirk, to Dwayne Wade and all them who got inducted earlier this month. But me and Jay have compiled a list of 3 players each that we think that not a lot of people are talking about having Hall of Fame consideration, but we're going to be trying to make the case for them. So we're going to be going back and forth, kind of like presenting our name to the table. And then, play with us down below. What do you guys think? Are these players that we are considering for the Hall of Fame worthy candidates? Or do you think that we are kind of reaching too much? Which is kind of the whole point of this. We're going to try to think of guys that you're not thinking of. I mean, we know that the Stephs are going to make it. We know the LeBrons and all those guys near the top are going to make it. But what about these guys? What about the guys that we're going to be talking about on this list we're going to be getting into today? Jay, how do you feel about the list that you compiled here?
I feel pretty good. I mean, I'm not sure if these guys are going to be considered wild cards, but that's what the comment section is for, man. So we'll see.
100%. All right, Jay, I'm going to throw it over to you. Who is the first guy that you want to like put in there for Hall of Fame consideration already?
So the first guy I'm going to go with is my boy Rasheed Wallace. Ball don't lie.
Ooh, interesting.
I think this one, I don't want to say it's relatively easy, but I think this is one of those where a guy that is synonymously known with the NBA in a lot of different ways deserves to be in this conversation. Legitimately, we talk about the progression of the play style of the big man position. This is a 4-time All-Star. He did win a championship in 2004 with the Pistons. So championship ring, multi-time All-Star, check. All-rookie team in 1995 and 1996 seasons, and the 1995-96 season. So we got the all-rookie season, we've got NBA champion, multi-time all-star, and you have to talk about what Rasheed Wallace brought to the floor, right? He's a two-positional player, being able to play the power forward position and the center position. You talk about versatility in the NBA right now, and it's one of the most important things in the league. If you can't move up and down the roster in terms of whether what you can play or what you can guard, it makes it a lot harder for you to get on the floor. And if you look at some of the statistics for a guy like Rasheed Wallace, he's averaged 15-plus points multiple times in his career. He's a guy who's averaging at least a block, if not nearly 2 2 blocks a game. In some instances, there's even an instance in the 2003-2004 season where he averaged like around 3 blocks a game in his transition from Atlanta to Detroit. I mean, insane two-way player. And you have to talk about the stretchability, right? One of the first OGs when it comes to the stretch 4 position, being able to shoot the ball from distance. Rasheed Wallace in this NBA, we just saw the kind of money that Brook Lopez made. We just saw the kind of money that Kristaps Porzingis made. At 6'10", with this kind of versatility, the kind of impact and intensity he played with on the defensive end, this is a $20 million a year player in today's NBA. And if that kind of guy can translate from era to era in the way that he played, but just didn't get recognized for it in the time frame that he was around, I definitely think it should get a lot more credit now that we've seen the game almost cater a lot more to the play style that he was moving towards.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. Rasheed Wallace, I think, like you mentioned, doesn't get enough love, and I like the way that you kind of framed this like idea of him making the Hall of Fame, to the point where when you think about how the game has evolved today, Rasheed Wallace, you gotta get, like you said, you gotta get give credit to the OGs, and Rasheed Wallace was hitting 100 threes in a season. Sure, it doesn't sound like a lot nowadays, but 100 threes in the early 2000s at the power forward / center position. That's a lot. That is a lot, especially when in a time where they weren't encouraging you to shoot threes or anything, trying to shoot like a high volume of them. This guy was hitting 100 threes a year, over 30, over 30-something% from three during those years. He was solid, and I think that he definitely deserves consideration for this. The trade that he that happened during the 2004 season, where he was brought into Detroit and basically changed around their fortunes and was the extra piece they needed to win a championship. Of course, the impact there cannot be denied. And like you said, like his play style for the time that he was playing was so unique and was very effective. And he's just, I feel like, one of the most underrated players in that era. But Jay, I'm gonna pose it to you, kind of like the point against it. He really didn't have that long of a prime.
Yeah.
In his career, he really didn't. And what is gonna hurt him when getting Hall of Fame consideration, and probably this is the case why he hasn't made the Hall of Fame yet, is the counting stats. Only 16,000 points in his career. Only, yes, he was a good defender. He had over 1,400 blocks, which is pretty good. He only played, I think, total only 1,100 games when he missed basically like a lot of seasons where he missed 20 plus games. I think that the idea of Rasheed Wallace is a kind of a Hall of Famer, especially with the impact he had in the certain years. But do you think the longevity will hurt him in the long run, and that's why he hasn't been in the Hall of Fame?
I think longevity obviously is one of the bigger things that touches on. I think another thing that you have to point out is that he's never been a go-to guy on his team. That's another thing that obviously points out. You mentioned the Detroit team, and obviously he comes off more as like the cherry on top trade that put them over the top in terms of being able to really make a transition towards being that championship level team in 04. But I think there's a couple of things that needs to be taken into consideration. One of the funniest things that I think is kind of important is that Kenny the Jet Smith, he said one time when they were talking about the next 25, right? This was around the time that I think the NBA top 50 list came out at the time. And they were putting together the next 25. And one of the things that he mentioned is, if a rule changed because of you, that means you are now synonymous with NBA history in a way where they cannot tell the story of the NBA without you. Whether for good or for bad, Rasheed Wallace had an influence on the technical fouls rule to the point that they had to kind of put a limit on how many of these things you could get, because this dude just played with so much energy, so much passion, so much aggression even, that the technical fouls piled up, and it made it to the point where the NBA had to clean up their game a little bit more. And although, again, whether you look at it as a good or a bad, he is now synonymous in NBA history as being a part of the rule changes in the league. Something else, TV, that's universal. Whether you go to the blacktop or you go on 2K, you go into the NBA and you watch a game now. Ball don't lie, TV. Ball don't lie. You know what I mean? So when you look at it, don't get me wrong, Rasheed Wallace definitely has his flaws in terms of his overall career, But when you look at a lot of the things that work well from him in terms of just telling the narrative of not only just his career, but obviously just the framework of the NBA and the time that he was around, I don't necessarily think you could tell the story. I think you can tell the story of the NBA without Rasheed Wallace per se, but I think that he has little nuances within the steps along across the league and the progression of the league, I guess like positionally and stuff like that, that all kind of compound into like, okay, we gotta at least give this brother a look.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned it there, the cultural impact I think is underrated when it comes to Rasheed Wallace. The whole technical fouls thing, like you mentioned, if you get a certain amount of technical fouls now, you're getting suspended. When Rasheed, like sometimes we're having 49 a season, that would basically get him like suspended like 5 or 10 games in the NBA nowadays. So he definitely made an impact over there.
Yeah.
The stats, again, it's going to be hard to kind of back up the case, and that's why he probably made the Hall of Fame already. But if you think about the cultural impact and the other ways he affected the game of basketball, along with the stretch ball that we see pretty often here today, he definitely deserves a case for sure. Jay, I'm going to throw you my first guy over to you.
Huh?
What if I told you that we could have a Hall of Famer who is considered one of the best defensive players of his era, someone who has only matched Ben Wallace for most defensive player of the years, one of the top, a 6-time all defensive team player, multiple time All Star, 4-time All NBA. You would consider that to be a Hall of Fame level player, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm talking about Rudy Gobert. I think maybe it's just me. I think that the narrative around Rudy Gobert kind of paints him as a trash player right now, but I hate to bring it to you. I think he's a Hall of Famer. This guy like has reached like heights, especially as a um, like a defensive threat that only people like that Ben Wallace had back in the day. His rebounding is again one of the best in the league for the longest time. He had quite a bit of success, although not playoff success with the Utah Jazz, like having multiple seasons, winning 50 plus games. Again, multiple time All Star, multiple time All NBA. The contract right now seems bad, and that's why I think he's like his value is being diminished even more. But you can't take away what he has done basically for the past 6 or 7 years and the impact he's made defensively and what he made, like what he turned that Utah Jazz team into for that time being, especially like paired up with a guard like Donovan Mitchell and all that good stuff. Some people don't want to admit it, but I do think that Rudy Gobert is a Hall of Famer.
So I think it's funny that you mention him in this kind of like disdain, as if like, okay, people don't believe he's a Hall of Famer, or maybe there's this argument against him in terms of being in the Hall of Fame class. And I don't think you should be as down on your take as you sound about it. If I'm actually being honest, I think that's a really fair play. And Ben Wallace making the Hall of Fame recently, I think really opens that up. When you think about the kind of counting stats that Ben Wallace had, along with the fact that he was a 4-time All-Star, 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, these are all things that you could argue is on similar footing with. You could also argue that from a counting stats perspective, Rudy Gobert might not have been as physically dominant, but I think from a counting stats perspective, we can both agree that he was more effective, or he has been more effective than Ben Wallace on both sides of the floor as a
Yeah,
totality. So
yeah,
I think when you put it all together, I think if Ben Wallace is considered as a Hall of Fame caliber player, Rudy Gobert, up to this point, should be considered as a Hall of Fame caliber player. I think that's a tough one because I think obviously you're put in a position to wonder whether or not this back portion of his prime is really going to taint the overall narrative around just how effective he is as a player. But I think if you let all of that go and you just look at things through the lens of was he productive and on what level was that productivity, Rudy Gobert is a Hall of Famer. I think I agree with you.
yeah. He played at such an elite level, especially on the defensive end. For about like a 5 year stretch, he was considered one of the most like dominating forces on that side of the ball. The reason he buys is really gonna hurt him at the moment. And I think that's what's like hurting his narrative, especially with what's happening with Team France and the way that they went out and how horrible he has played in FIBA. That's not helping his case at all. But I think in the totality of it, if you really just like take a step back, look at everything Rudy Gobert has done, I think that he deserves to be in the like have Hall of Fame consideration. And honestly, at the end of the day, he is a Hall of Fame worthy player, especially with. I mean, one of the things that we we talked about when it comes to Hall of Famers and like all-time greats, is that what did you do great or elite for like a decent amount of period of time? And Rudy Gobert, it was the interior defense. It was the fact that he was basically the defensive system over there in Utah. That deserves some sort of love. That is going to be my first case for a Hall of Famer. Jay, who is your next guy?
The next guy I'm gonna go with, I mean, I think there's a lot of different routes to still go to. It sucks because I realized Jack Sigma already is in the Hall of Fame. That was a guy that I was leaning towards as well, and I realized he popped up. I think the next guy I'm going to lean with is going to be, let's go obscure. I think that Kevin Johnson is another guy that should be considered in terms of the Hall of Fame. Can you hear me? Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I got you. Yeah.
So Kevin Johnson is another one of those guys that I think his Suns years are obviously the time of the Suns is probably the most notable for me, I think, in terms of what tells the story for him. Multi-time All-Star, one of the better two-way positional guards in the league. This was a guy who I think was much better for his time than given credit a lot of the time. He was a dude that I feel like was always very effective and very competitive in a league where, despite the fact that the big man dominated, he was in conversation amongst many, like in terms of like top 10 point guards in the league at the time consistently. I think something that's really important too is just how effective of a scorer this guy was. By his second year in Phoenix, he was a 20-point per game scorer, and he pretty much never let the gas pedal go until like his last two seasons in the league. And by that point, he had only played, that was when he was kind of on the tail end off 50 games in his second to last season, and obviously only 6 games in his very last season. But other than that, from the minute he got to Phoenix, he never dropped below 15 points per game, and he averaged at least 20 points per game 5 different times. This was a guy who was an offensive juggernaut at the guard position at that time, filling up the stat sheet, and cannot be slept on, 4 times averaged double-digit assists. So I think that Kevin Johnson, I think, is a multi-time All-NBA, multi-time All-Star, most improved player winner, I believe, as well. Like, this is a dude who I think he has a pretty decent resume. If you had to talk about guards in the NBA, he's one of the better fill 'em up guards that's not in the Hall of Fame yet.
Yeah, no, for sure. In terms of you talking about 90s point guards, when you really do think about it, there's a very few guys that kind of like were like really like elite point guards back in the 90s. You can maybe think of Gary Payton. That's the time already past Magic. You still got early Jason Kidd, early Steve Nash. But Kevin Johnson was probably like in the mix for top 5 point guards every single year for a decent stretch of time, for sure. And like especially those years where him and Charles Barkley were playing at an elite level, they were playing in the finals together. He did have some success there over there in Phoenix for sure. My only thing about Kevin Johnson is that post the 92 season, the injuries just kept like derailing this guy's season every single year. Whether it was the leg injuries, whether it was the knee. This guy was just having constant injuries near the end of his career, and he like that those injuries really take him from Hall of Fame potential to Hall of very good. It's just like he's more of like one of those like what if type of players. Kind of like maybe not to the extent of Penny Hardaway because he's still like he had like more seasons of success, but if he were healthy, what type of counting stats will we see Kevin Johnson have? What type of assist numbers? Because like you mentioned, he was one of the top playmakers over there at the point guard position back in the day. Having only 13,000 assists, 13,000 points, 6,000 assists, and only played a total of 735 games in his career. His prime years were definitely, if he continued those longer, would be Hall of Fame worthy to me. But just again, the longevity and the fact those injuries kind of like haunted him in the second half of his career probably keeps him out. But he definitely should be someone who deserves more consideration for sure.
Yeah, I think just kind of last points on Kevin Johnson. I think it's just the fact that you make a lot of great points. Longevity is going to be the part that hurts a lot of these guys on the back nine. I feel like, especially when you talk about their primes. I do think that Kevin Johnson's effectiveness when on the floor is one of those things. Again, if not tainted by injury, I think is considered as a Hall of Fame class career. And I think once you get to the point of pulling hairs, I think we get to a point where you can make a decent argument for him. Um, but I see your point nonetheless. Kevin Johnson is one of those arguments where, again, like you mentioned, when you talk about the Grant Hills, the Penny Hardaways, even like the Tracy McGrady's to a certain degree, when you talk about these different conversations of just like how much does their prime carry the conversation, it's one of those things where it's to each his own in terms of whether or not you're willing to give that enough value to put him in the hall or not.
Yeah, 100%. But the case you made was good. I do think that he had at his peak potential Hall of Fame level potential, especially like with the lack of like elite point guards they had back in the 90s. But the injuries are going to be tough to keep to put him in there for sure. I like the way that our lists are going. Are you going more of like a past sort of route? I'm going more of a current sort of route, and I think I'm going to go with that also with my second pick. And it's a twofer for this one.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with for my next two. Give me Lou Williams and Jamal Crawford as a twofer here.
Okay.
I think that these two guys deserve some Hall of Fame recognition, just because like I mentioned before, when it comes to having a lead skill and like mastering that skill, that's what a lot of these Hall of Fame level players have in terms of that. I mean, we talked about Rudy Gobert and his defense and how elite he was on that end. What Lou Williams and Jamal Crawford provided to the league was probably the two best six men in NBA history, each having 3 Six Man of the Year awards to their name. Sure, they didn't have any All-Star appearances. Sure, they didn't have probably the most playoff success. But in terms of their role and the lack of time they spent like starting games, they put up some decent numbers. You look at Lou Williams' prime, his best season was 2018 with the Los Angeles Clippers, 22 points per game, 5 assists, 1 steal a game. I think he won Six Man of the Year that year as well. And in terms of Jamal Crawford, someone who you talked about with Rasheed Wallace's cultural impact, I think Jamal Crawford has a low key slept on cultural impact in the NBA as well. In terms of like the dribble moves and the amount of like flair he brought to not just his game, but to the overall identity of the time of the Lob City Clippers. One of the most fun teams of this era. Again, won multiple Six Man of the Year awards, and he was pretty good. Basically, like I mean, you probably knew him from his time in Chicago, where he averaged basically 17 points a game, multiple 20-point per game seasons, and he never really let up his scoring averages until the very end. Even in his time as Phoenix, he had like a 50-point game like sprinkled in there as well. I think sure the counting stats will hurt these two as well. Jamal Crawford only like finished his career with 19,000 points, which is pretty close to 20. Thinking about all of that, Lou Williams only had 15,500. The counting stats are going to hurt him. The lack of All-Star games are going to hurt him. But just when you look at the whole role of the six man, and if you look at the two best to ever do it for that role, I think Lou Williams and Jamal Crawford deserve to be in that conversation.
Yeah, I think one of the main points that you made, especially on the back end, is them both being synonymous with the Six Man of the Year award. I'm actually looking it up now. Just how many do they have combined? Because I think that'll overall clarify. So yeah, so they're the only 3-time winners apiece.
Yeah.
Which is already a big deal as it is. And you think about the names that are associated with the Six Man Award in terms of winning it multiple times. Kevin McHale, Ricky Pierce, Detlef Schrempf are the only other ones that won the award twice. Jamal Crawford and Lou Williams in very big company there alone, just being able to surpass those two guys. Another thing I think is really important too is I think that they both brought a street ball culture that kind of revolutionized the microwave scorer. And I think that's become its own attribute within the NBA, which to some people is looked down upon, depending on how much of a liability that is defensively. But I think it also is seen as an asset on certain teams to just have that guy who you say, go in there, give us 15 to 20 minutes and just do everything you can to put the ball in the basket. I think you have created an attribute. You've created a fun attribute at that of being a guy who comes off of the bench and is just able to jack shots. I think that a lot of people, right, there's this weird dichotomy about this weird dichotomy between starting the game and finishing the game, right?
Yeah.
And Jamal Crawford and Lou Williams are both guys who may not have been starters in the NBA, but were guys that were reliable for their teams to have in the closing lineups of big games in order to be able to finish out and get victories. These are guys that, although you may not start the game off with them on the floor, those are guys that you are willing to not only have on the floor, but have the ball in their hands at the end of games. And it's made it a little bit more, maybe not popular necessarily, but a little bit more okay, a little bit more gratified to be a player who comes off of the bench and produces at a high level. So I think these are two really good picks because they have changed the viewpoint of what being a six man really is. It's not just the first guy off the bench who just so happens to be productive against second units. It's a guy who creates his own mold on the game in a way that can change the ebb and flow of any game at any time. I think that's really important, and I think those two guys epitomize that.
Yeah, 100%. I think again the cash stats are gonna kind of hurt them. I think just the fact that they don't have like the other parts of the resume like the All Stars, the championships are definitely gonna hurt them. But in terms of trying to like appreciate every part of the game of basketball, the six-man role has been so vital to teams for many years, and these guys are the best to have done it in the NBA. And in my opinion, I think they deserve to be in that conversation. Jay, who would be your final guy that you would have in this for your list?
All right, so the last guy that I've got at least is a little bit more current than the guys I leaned with beforehand, but a guy that I
Okay.
think I'm gonna get relatively passionate about in terms of this case because I think I've made it before. I think I've literally made this TikTok and just not posted it because I wasn't sure if I went to a wall. So we're gonna do it on the
Yeah.
podcast and give that the opportunity to kind of let this happen. But I'm tired of the Dwight Howard slander, TV. I understand the Taiwan stuff going on right now. I understand that the back nine of his career, following up after being in LA, heading to Houston, not having great postseason success with James Harden in Houston, bouncing from Atlanta to Charlotte to Washington, back to the Lakers, Philly, back to the Lakers. It's one of those things where the back half of Dwight Howard's career has not been kind to him, right?
Yeah.
In terms of what you remember about Dwight Howard, if we're going strictly off of recency bias, from 2016 to 2023, Dwight Howard is probably much more renowned for his insane 50-plus point performance in Taiwan than anything he's done from 2015 to 2022. Let's be honest. Even with him being on the bubble Lakers team, we both know how that went. We both know that Dwight Howard was not an insane producer of any kind
Yeah.
on that Lakers team during that championship stretch. And aside from that championship, there's not really much in the last 5 to 7 years that you can really hang your hat on when it comes to Dwight Howard. The unfortunate part about all of that is it makes us forget just how dominant this guy was basically from year 3 up until the 06-07 season, the third year for him in the league, all the way up to the 2013-2014 season in Houston, which was his last All-Star appearance. During that time frame, the dude was a 5-time rebound champ, 2-time block champ, multi-time defensive player of the year. He was in the
Yeah.
conversation. If everybody remembers, there was a conversation about who the best big man in the league was. And the conversation was between Dwight Howard, Brooklyn Nets version of Brook Lopez,
Yeah.
and Andrew Bynum, right? This was the
Yeah.
conversation. These were the debates. And Dwight Howard was in conversation as not just one of the best big men at his position. Dwight Howard was constantly in conversation for MVP, constantly in conversation for top 10 player in the league, right?
Yes.
That cannot be forgotten. I understand that the back nine of his career, it's kind of the Paul Pierce effect, right? This idea of the what have you done for me lately makes you forget how cold the guy once was when he was at the peak of his powers. And unlike the other two guys that I picked, Dwight Howard's peak, much more significant, much more longevity within the peak. And one other thing that's more notable is much more dominance within that peak in terms of his productivity. I think this idea that Dwight Howard is like a conversation as to whether or not he's going to be a Hall of Famer is insane to me. I think if we can say Rudy Gobert qualifies to be a Hall of Famer, if guy, I hate to keep throwing him under the bus in this sense, but if Ben Wallace, for example, is a Hall of Famer, if my guy, for example, who I think should be in conversation as well for Joakim Noah, I think is a dude who should be in consideration for as a Hall of Famer. If these are all guys at the center position who are getting real consideration as a Hall of Famer, Dwight Howard is a bona fide Hall of Famer. I don't know where the disconnect is. I think a lot of the recency bias is skewed the convo around just how good Dwight was. But this dude's a Hall of Famer, bro. Like this dude is a Hall of Famer, point blank, period.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. For me, this is no discussion. This is he's
Yeah.
a automatic Hall of Famer. If you just take, even if you take away the last 8 years, you take the first 8 years of his career, clearly a Hall of Famer. He was in the top 3 of MVP voting, I think, multiple times as well. He didn't win it. I think the closest time he won it was when it was him versus D Rose back in 2011, and he was that close to becoming the MVP. His first 8 years of his career is like one of the best. Like, firstly, one of the best defensive bigs of this era. Someone who was able to dominate on the offensive end as well. Led the Orlando Magic to the finals in 2009 as well. He's done everything you could, and I know that people wish his prime was longer, but that doesn't take away that he has had a clear Hall of Fame resume, and there's really no arguing it.
Yeah.
Now, of course, is the last few years gonna definitely hurt that? Yes, but that shouldn't take away anything from what he is able to do. To be honest, when we were talking about the NBA 75 list, almost a year ago on my podcast, I think we both agree he probably should have been on that list as well because his time has been that understated over especially during the prime of his career. But when it comes to the Hall of Fame conversation, easy. Dwight Howard is up there.
Yeah.
100%.
I think it's simple. I'm glad you agree. I don't know where this absurd conversation, like I was seeing posts where they were comparing Dwight Howard's prime to like Nikola Jokic and like who's the better center. I understand there's these little nuances where we can kind of poo-poo Dwight Howard's career by utilizing some of the current players of today, Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo at the big man position, and say you can make an argument that some of those guys have been more dominant than Dwight Howard. But then in that same realm, I understand the overall versatility of a guy like Joel Embiid. TV hot take alert, maybe. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
I think I would still take the prime version of Dwight Howard over what we've seen as the prime version of Joel Embiid right now, to be quite frankly honest.
I think that the injuries definitely do help, and I think that definitely do help his case. And although he's not as dominant offensively, his defensive impact was like one of a kind back in the day. Like it stood out so much, especially in that late 2000s era of the Orlando Magic. He was insane back then. I think people forget about that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times, remember, I think we had this conversation beforehand talking about the battle between Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid. And one of the things that a lot of people used to use before, of course, the Nuggets just went on to win the championship was the lack of playoff success and productivity by Nikola Jokic, right? And they were using that to poo-poo Jokic's overall MVP caliber season while not highlighting that Joel Embiid has had no better success in the postseason up until a similar point, right?
Yeah.
And then you look at it if by comparing a guy like Dwight Howard and Joel Embiid, okay, Dwight Howard has never won an MVP. He has also been considered as a top 3 and top 5 MVP candidate in multi-seasons, similar to Joel Embiid has. He's also won multiple Defensive Player of the Year, something that Joel Embiid has not had. He has led a team as the number 1 option on a team to the NBA Finals, something Joel Embiid has not successfully pulled off, has not even successfully gotten past the second round, mind you. So like I said, I would even make an argument that Dwight Howard is better in terms of its prime than Joel Embiid is in what we have seen of what his prime is. Yet I think a lot of people would consider even what Joel Embiid has done so far to be Hall of Fame-esque. So I think, like I said, just to put a bow on it, I do think Dwight Howard is a bona fide Hall of Famer. I think anybody who thinks opposite is just too worried about what has happened. What have you done for me lately? And I don't think that tells the story of Dwight's career.
100%. Before we move on to the top 5 centers, I do have one more guy to throw out there. And of course, this is going to be a little bit of a personal bias, but I do believe that this man is a Hall of Famer. We got a 6-time All-Star, a 1-time All-NBA player, a NBA champion for the first time outside of the U.S. Give me Kyle Lowry as a Hall of Famer. I think Kyle Lowry for sure is a Hall of Famer. Sure, would have been better if there was more All-NBA appearances? Sure, but he's still a 6-time All-Star. And his stats, especially in his time with the Toronto Raptors, multiple 20-point-per-game seasons, very good playmaker as well. I think in terms of Kyle Lowry's career, and I think like this should be the case for like the Hall of Fame in general, if you have like the best player in franchise's history, there should be like the best player in each franchise's history should have like be represented in the Hall of Fame. Vince Carter is probably gonna be in the Hall of Fame, but I still believe that Kyle Lowry is the best Raptor of all time. That his role in the 2019 championship, the fact that he was a perennial All-Star for 6 years straight over there in the East. It says a lot about Kyle Lowry's career. A very good three-point shooter as well. I think that he is someone who, once again, with the contract that Miami Heat gave him and like the lack of production that he's seen on the Miami Heat over the last couple of years, maintained his legacy a little bit. But when you just think about even just his Raptor career, just what he's been able to do over there, wouldn't be a big part of the championship as well. Seeing how much he means to the country of Canada, he's the best Raptor of all time, and I think that deserves some weight as well. I think he's a Hall of Famer.
I think that Kyle Lowry is a good one. I think what you made, your leading statement is your best statement. I think when you say is a guy, I consider this guy as the best player in name this team's franchise history. That's enough to me, I feel like, to get strong consideration. He's also won a championship. He's been a multi-time All-Star, as you mentioned beforehand. I think one of the most important things that you have to look at when you talk about this league is guys who represent franchises as the head of maybe an era, as the head of maybe a legacy in terms of, for example, I don't think Kawhi Leonard will ever be synonymous with Toronto, but I think that he will always be heavily respected amongst the Raptors community for what it was that he brought to that fan base. So there's different things that I think play into it besides just overall on the floor productivity. Being synonymous with a franchise, TV, I think actually that matters a lot more now with the amount of player movement we've seen. I think being able to have the kind of longevity that a guy like Kyle Lowry has had with the Toronto Raptors before moving on to Miami is something that is going to become so out of the ordinary moving forward with the kind of player movement that we've seen, that guys who are able to take that mantle are going to mean more in the NBA history moving forward. So I think that actually plays into Kyle Lowry's case like very well.
Yeah, 100%. As Raptor fans, other people outside the Raptors fans organization will probably still make the case for Kawhi Leonard being the best Raptor, Vince Carter still being the best Raptor. But people from here will know and will continue to back this up that Kyle Lowry is the greatest Raptor of all time, and he deserves his place at Canton. Yeah, so that's all of our Hall of Fame reaches or underrated guys that we think should make the Hall of Fame. Let us know down below if you agree with any of our statements. If you think that we're reaching too much on one of them, let us know as well. We'd love to hear your input. Jay, we finally reached the end of the series, man. We finally reached the end. We've done the top 5 point guards, the top 5 shooting guards, the top 5 small forwards, power forwards, and now we've made it to the center position. We are going to be doing our top 5 centers over here. Of course, they have been dominating the MVP discussions over the last couple of years with Jokic and Embiid. So you know that the big man position is kind of in a bit of a renaissance right now, especially because if you know back in the day when we had to have discussions whether DeAndre Jordan was the best center in the league or not, like 6-7 years ago, you know it was some tough times over there. But It's revived itself. You have some really skilled guys over here. Jay, how you feeling about this list?
I feel pretty good about this. I'm glad that we've been doing top fives because this is one of those positions where once you start getting past like 8 or so, like once you get to like 8 through 12, it starts getting tricky and it starts getting to the point of like kind of like, pull a straw out and whoever's name is on it, that's the one you can kind of put there. Top five is still a little hard, but I think this might be the easiest position to rank personally.
I think
Power
so.
forward
And
was
I said,
terribly
yeah,
difficult.
power forwards was very tough. But I think
Yeah.
we have had like very similar lists in the past. But I think in terms of this list, the top 5 guys are pretty like bog standard as to like who's going to be on it. The order might be a little bit wonky, but I don't think it's going to be like something like too different between our two lists. But we're gonna start with you, Jay, at number 5. Who do you have? Or no, actually, let's go to honorable mention. Who would you have as your honorable mention for this list?
The honorable mention I had was actually Kristaps Porzingis. I was very moved by his past season with the Washington Wizards, and I think he had an all-star caliber season, and nobody really spoke on it. I think the fact that
Yeah.
he was so productive, and the biggest thing was he was very healthy last year. That's something I think is really good, and now maybe I'm projecting a little bit, but going over to the Boston Celtics, a franchise that is decided for the first time in quite some time to make a shake-up level move that's going to change their play style. He's going to be in a position where he's not only going to be playing winning basketball again, but he's going to be playing as probably the third banana next to Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. That's going to get and looks and different variations of sets on the floor that's going to give him an opportunity to thrive. If he can hit the three ball at a 35% clip, he can continue to be a defensive menace here and there, which he's shown real spurts of. And the biggest thing is he can continue to play at a healthy rate, which is what he was able to do last year. I think he's a guy who can go back to being like a consistent 20-7, 20-8 guy with like a block and a half per game. He's going to have Robert Williams. He's going to have Al Horford as guys on the back end where he might play next to them. He might play behind them in certain situations. There's a lot to like about Kristaps Porzingis, especially when healthy. And now he's happy with the
Yeah.
Boston Celtics. That's been a big thing that's been reported, is that he's happy now being in this situation with them. And he's healthy, or at least let's say healthier. I think he's got a little foot thing going on at this moment.
Yeah.
But he's healthier than he's been in years past, and he's coming off of a season where he was very productive, and now he's stepping into the limelight as part of a team that's going back into winning basketball. That's something to look forward to, and that's something to be excited about. So I really like Kristaps right now.
Yeah, that's definitely a good choice over there as your honorable mention. For myself, I'm going to look at someone who we actually talked about who was in the conversation for best center in the league maybe over a decade ago, but I still think he holds a lot of weight in this discussion, and I think he's right outside the top 5. Give me Brook Lopez. Give me Brook Lopez as my little honorable mention. Second place in Defensive Player of the Year voting. One of the top shooting centers in the league right now. We've seen the impact that he's made from missing a bunch of games in 2021, coming back and making the Bucks a top 3 defense again, being one of the leader in blocks, like deterring a lot of shots, but also contesting a lot of them. I mean, in terms of opponent's field goal percentage, like against Brook Lopez, he's one of the best in the league in terms of defending the rim. Very good center there, and he still has some offensive game to him. I think if he's healthy again this year, there should still be a top 5 team because that just allows Giannis to be a roamer out there on the perimeter inside the paint as well. Brook Lopez's impact to the Bucks is massive, and I think the fact that he's been able to change his game and still like do what he does at an elite level should have consideration. That's why I have him outside of my top 5. But Jay, going on to number 5 for you, who do you got?
Number 5 for me, and I'm a little bit lower on this guy because of the way the postseason went, but it's Bam Adebayo. Bam Adebayo is at the 5 spot for me because of the fact that I think that he is so impactful defensively. His ability to switch, I think that dude can legitimately guard 1 through 5. I think he's one of the guys in this league that is extremely capable of being able to guard every position at a relatively high level. He's an all NBA caliber defender. And he's one of the better guys you want in a pinch in terms of closing games on the defensive side of the ball. The biggest thing is that the dude finds a way to be so passive offensively, despite the fact that, especially on a Miami Heat team that longs for shot creation, he does not seek out his offensive ability in ways that you would wish for. I think Miami is a perfect environment for him to be able to be more aggressive on the offensive end. You have guys like Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, who can self-shot create. You have dudes like Tyler Hero, who can be microwave scorers, three-point shooters. Once upon a time that you had Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, you have Duncan Robinson. You have all of these shooters. You have all this opportunity on the inside to just be a menace as a force on the low block, as an undersized guy at the center position. And instead, despite being a dude with so much ability to take guys off the bounce, maybe get a high rise jumper every now and then, he has some post work in there. He's not aggressive in terms of going to get his shot, and it really limits what I think his potential is. And so I'm a little bit lower on Bam. I think Bam could be, I think there's a world where Bam could be as high as 3 sometimes if he went, like, when he plays aggressively on both ends of the floor. But he's so passive, and that's the weird thing about him and his teammate Jimmy Butler. And on one end of the spectrum, they could be one of the most dangerous players at the position in the league, and then on the other end of the spectrum, you're scratching your head and you're wondering where they are on the floor, and that's Bam Adebayo a lot of times. He's still a top 5 guy in his position, but his passivity is the thing that really is a turnoff for me, especially on a team like Miami, where him being more aggressive could really elevate them to put them over the hump as a championship caliber team. Not just the guys who knock on the door, not just the guys who make the finals and give a good run, but really can hoist up the Larry O'Brien, and he just hasn't taken that step yet.
Yeah, 100%. I think people have been waiting for like the next Bam Adebayo jump in his game, because we could see it at his best. We could see that jump coming. If he could do that on a regular basis, he could really take himself to that upper echelon of players in the NBA. But the fact that we haven't seen it on a consistent level yet, yes, he has been great over his last couple of years. But the fact that we haven't seen kind of the aggressiveness and the kind of willingness to kind of like take that mantle as the next guy over there in Miami is it's been kind of like hard to put him like higher on this list than you want to. So I completely understand him being at number 5 for you. But to be honest, Jay, the same argument you made for Bam Adebayo, I can use it for my guy at number 5. At number 5, give me Domantas Sabonis. I think he had a phenomenal, and I mean a phenomenal regular season there with the Sacramento Kings. A huge reason as to why their franchise is resurging right now, being considered one of the best young teams in the league, one of the most surprising teams in the league. That mean that freaking Fox Sabonis pick and roll was absolutely deadly throughout the entire year. Like, especially when he averages 19, 12, and almost 7 assists a game, looking like a baby Jokic out there. But that playoff run really like tainted like what I see about from Domantas Sabonis. The same way that you talked about Bam Adebayo, I kind of got the same vibes from Domantas Sabonis this past playoffs. I mean, at a lot of the points, the Warriors were just begging this man to shoot. And we know that he is a good player, but once he gets into his own head, he kind of just like loses track of it, and then just like takes away the entire flow of the Sacramento Kings team. When they traded for Domantas Sabonis, like for Tyrese Halliburton back in the day, Tyrese Halliburton for Domantas Sabonis back in the day, we thought that the pace was going to be halted because of his slow footing. And that hasn't really been the case this year, because it's just everything just moves into the flow of the offense. He's the one who's like really setting up everyone. Everything is working good. But when the Warriors are forcing him to do things that he's not comfortable with doing, it takes the entire offense out of it. And I think that's something that really hurted his image for me this past playoffs. I think another training camp, another year with the Sacramento Kings, things will get better for him. But just the way things ended last season left a sour taste in my mouth. He's still like a very, very good center, but I have to put him at number 5. Give me Domantas Sabonis.
I think that's fair. I mean, just for full transparency, as a way to kind of move this along, because I had him at 4, or you can kind of like move up to 4 now.
Yeah.
I had Domantas Sabonis at 4, and I think it's because at the end of the day, he is a regular season floor raiser. He is a dude who can get your team to the postseason. He is the dude who during the regular season can carry you to a top 4 seed in a league where now we have the play-in tournament. We have this dogfight in the Western Conference, top to bottom, where everybody's just good enough to be dangerous enough. He raised the floor offensively to an all-time caliber level offensively for that team. Remind you, even even when you look at the makeup of this team, yes, you would say they're a more offensively driven team, but I don't think that anybody looked at this team at the beginning of the season and said Domantas Sabonis would be the driving force of creating one of the top most effective offensive units in basketball. I think a lot of people would say De'Aaron Fox would have to take a significant leap, and he did do so.
Yeah.
He did do so. He was one, I think he won clutch player of the year as one of the most
Yes.
effective players in the fourth quarter that we had last season. Malik Monk had a huge year resurgence wise last season. There was a lot to like. Keegan Murray was a very effective player. One of my favorite low key guys, Harrison Barnes, very effective guy. They were very they were struggling at the center position, and I think that Domantas Sabonis was shouldered with a lot more than what he's capable of, especially when having to be effective defensively, and I think that's what hurt him. But when you think about Sacramento Kings basketball, you have to point to Domantas Sabonis as numero uno, as what flipped the switch for turning them from a middle of the pack to lower bottom tier team in the Western Conference to being one of the top seeds in the West last season. I don't fault Domantas too much for last postseason, because at the end of the day, we knew that the Sacramento Kings were not necessarily ready just yet. We knew that the regular season was not necessarily the litmus test for, oh, they're going to be dangerous in the postseason. But, and everybody who checks out the TikTok, I'm just saying, should know this. I said before the season started, the Sacramento Kings are now competent with a real optimized roster. They're going to be dangerous enough to make the postseason. They did exactly that. And for a team that was on a record pace in terms of years outside of the postseason, just making the playoffs changes the dynamic in Sacramento. I think when you talk about what Domantas Sabonis has done in just the last season, there's a lot to value in that. Now, I will admit, because I was on the Sacramento Kings hype train before the year started, there's probably some bias towards Domantas Sabonis because he's confirming some of the takes that I took prior to the year. But I think his ability to not only do so, but supersede that and unlock a guy like De'Aaron Fox in the process, I think is huge. We give James Harden a lot of underlining credit to being able to help uplift Joel Embiid into being able to finally complete that MVP feat, right? I think something can also be said for Domantas Sabonis stepping in and helping elevate De'Aaron Fox into becoming an all-star caliber, all NBA level kind of point guard. As a guy who a season before was still on the outside looking in, where we were having conversations about a ton of other guys in the hierarchy being above him. And now we've moved the goalpost a little bit, and De'Aaron Fox is getting much more consideration at the position now. I think that should also be favored as well.
Yeah, 100%. Domantas Sabonis. I mean, I like the point you made there. He is honestly the biggest reason for this whole turnaround. And you talked about the big season from Malik Monk and Keegan Murray as well. Those dribble handoffs throughout the entire season that the Kings were running for all of those guys was one of the most effective offensive plays in the entire basketball. There's a reason why the Kings had the highest offensive rating in NBA history. The amount of shots they were able to get up, the efficiency they were able to do that. This was all spearheaded by Domantas Sabonis and his ability to work in that mid-range area and be the Jokic for that team, and it's worked out well for them. Hopefully that continues to move on to next season. Hopefully with another year under their belt, they can get used to playing with each other and hopefully have more postseason success. I'm gonna move past my number 4 really quickly because he is your number 5. Give me Bam Adebayo. I get the same reasons you get about him for the past playoffs. I really wish he was more aggressive in that NBA Finals matchup versus the Nuggets, because if he was more aggressive, that would have unlocked Jimmy Butler some more. It would have gave them made Jokic work more, but he just wasn't able to do that. And I think that he has the ability to. He just hasn't had the confidence to kind of take on that mantle. But I still have him over Domantas Sabonis just because of his versatility on both sides of the floor. I think he's one of the most underrated passers in the league. I think given the opportunity, he could average near the number of assists that Sabonis is getting, just because he has underrated vision. And of course, like you mentioned, one of the best defenders in the league. He can guard basically 1 through 5. One of the best big man defenders as well. One of the best shot blockers. I think he's a damn good player, and I still see that he can take the next step. maybe I'm being a bit too optimistic, but at the end of the day, I still think his versatility and his his defensive impact kind of outweighs the bonuses. All-around ability there as well. I'm gonna have Bam Adebayo number 4. Jay, moving on to number 3. Who do you got?
Number 3 is where I think stuff obviously starts to even out for us. I'm gonna put Anthony Davis here. I think at the end of the day, healthy AD is still just one of the most effective guys at the center position, despite the fact that he doesn't like playing it. We understand that when he plays the 5, there's a different dynamic to the Lakers. It opens up a lot. There's a lot of damage that he does as an offensive and defensive player. Now, something that should be noted, Anthony Davis has stepped away from being a stretch big in a way that I think has really hurt his perception. I think one of the biggest things that was so cool about him, especially in his New Orleans time, was he was a guy who was heave-ho from the three-point line. He was a guy who was super effective around the rim on both offense and defense. And it seems like he's lost his three-point touch. And by him losing his three-point touch, he's kind of lost his luster as an offensive player. It's kind of become much more physical, which I think is good for the center position. But I think it takes away a little bit of what makes him special because of the fact that he was able to be a 35% clip kind of guy from beyond the arc, and he had to make you honest. I think one of the most dangerous things about the 2020 bubble was that we became, and I don't want to say we as in me, because I knew it was a fluke. And TV, I think we even had this conversation. We kind of believed that it was a flash in the pan. But for those who did not, there was this belief that the insane three-point shooting splits that guys like Anthony Davis were having during the bubble time, some believed it was an aberration, a la us. Others believed that maybe this was going to be the start of the norm, a la others, where 36 and 37% from 3 on 3 to 4 attempts per game was going to become something that Anthony Davis could put together on a season-to-season basis. Well, it ain't been that. It ain't been that at all. And that's one of the things that I think is really hurt, because we've believed that if he could be that kind of guy, or even just be consistent 35 to 36% three-point shooter from out there, that would be a dude who would kind of surpass even the insane playmaking ability of a Jokic or insane physical dominance on the low block of a Joel Embiid, and put him at the top amongst the center position. But that three-point shot paired with his injury history have kind of diminished the feel around Anthony Davis over the last couple of seasons. And so that's why he gets slotted at 3.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for the top 2 guys, I don't even have to really even hide it. It's the 2 last MVPs. I don't think it's there's any hiding that in terms of the top centers in the league. But Anthony Davis, from time to time, still shows that he has that MVP quality. If you remember earlier this year, I think the stretch before he got injured, he was averaging 30 and 12 or 30 and 13. And we were having conversations once again. Anthony Davis, when he's at his best, he's a top 5 player in the league. We know that. The talent is there. But we've had these conversations about Kawhi Leonard on this list. We've had conversations about Zion Williamson on this list. We know the talent is there. The fact that he's not able to show it on a regular basis is the concerning part. The three-point shooting going down isn't helping his case either. And to be honest, when it came to that Nugget series in the conference finals, he didn't assert himself as one of the as a good comparable matchup to Nikola Jokic. I really didn't think that he took advantage of that matchup enough. I was hoping to see a bit more of an aggressive AD, which we didn't see in the conference finals. So yes, he's the lead. We know he's the lead. The injuries are going to continue to hurt him. The shooting isn't there like it was from a couple years ago. But at the end of the day, we know that at his best, and he could see it from time to time, he is a top 5 talent in this league. He just has to continue to show that. But his lack of consistency in being healthy and showing that is the reason why we have to have him a little bit lower on this list. But we have him at number 3, which is not bad whatsoever. Jay, at number 2, who do you got?
That's where I got to slot Joel Embiid. I don't care if he's the reigning MVP. The tail of the tape is that I believe that Nikola Jokic should have won his 3rd straight MVP. He just so happened to be at the back 9 of a lot of recency bias and a lot of voter fatigue, I believe. I also think that the tail is in the tape, right? Nikola Jokic, whether you like it or not, He is the guy standing at the top of the mountain right now. He is the guy that a lot of people are considering as the best player in the league right now. He is the guy that is the best center on the best team in the NBA as of right now. You pair that with his overall counting stats, his overall effectiveness, and the fact that he has a much better track record now, not only as a postseason performer, but also, let's just say from a simple standpoint, from a health perspective. He is just a much more reliable player, a much more effective player. I don't care how dominant Joel Embiid is when he is on the floor because there's too much time, there's too many times where we have to add the caveat of when he is on the floor. And when you're splitting hairs between 1 and 2, when he is your per minute MVP cannot be my best player in the best player at the position. Per minute MVP does nothing for me. Most impactful player at the position is what gets the top spot in my list, and that is Nikola Jokic. So Joel Embiid is a number 2, and Jokic is number 1.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to like really get into this. I swear especially me and you, we've had this
Yeah.
conversation for months now. I don't think we have to go too much into it. I do want to give Joel Embiid some of his flowers, though. I know that because the Jokic has won the championship, he's getting kind of beat up right now. But man, his career is just crazy. I mean, like he did like miss like quite a bit of it. Like he missed all of the first 2 seasons, and then he finally started as a rookie in his 3rd season. But his career average of being 27 and 11 on his career is absolutely crazy to see Joel Embiid play at that level. And we're not taking anything away from that. He is absolutely amazing. But, and especially on the defensive end too, which what we always talk about when it comes to Joel Embiid, that's what some people want to make the argument for why he's better than Jokic. But there's a reason why he's number 2 and Nikola Jokic is number 1. Nikola Jokic overall impact on the game of basketball, especially for the Denver Nuggets, is just unmatched in this league, it feels like. The way that he is able to dominate in the post, operate from the outside, being one of the top rebounders, being the top assist guys, and his play being able to lead to an NBA championship, that just puts it over the top for me. We've seen what he's been able to do being a back-to-back MVP prior to this season as well. The All-NBAs are there. The Finals MVP is there, winning the championship, arguably being a top 20 player all time. Maybe that's a discussion we can have for another time. But Nikola Jokic has really elevated himself into that all-time great stratosphere, which I don't think Joel Embiid has just quite yet. But it's always going to be a battle between both never best center in the league, which is always great to see. Because like I mentioned before, the center position was kind of lacking like about 10 years ago. So it's good to see that as it's reviving over here. But yeah, Joel Embiid, he's great. Nothing to take away from him over there. He is the reigning MVP. But Nikola Jokic has shown us time and time again why he is the best, and he will continue to be the best because he is both our number 1s. I think the top 3 is pretty obvious. I think both of us do agree with that. Let us know down below if you agree with our list. If there's someone that we didn't even discuss deserve to be over there, let us know down below. Jay, let us move on to the next topic. And we're going to be getting into another one of our NBA drafts. And today, we are going to be doing a type of draft which is pretty like interesting. Because when we think of journeymans, we think of players like Ish Smith. We think of players like Jeff Green, who have like played for like 10 plus teams. Well, for today's draft, we're going to be acknowledging those journeymen, and we're going to be creating the best team possible with players who have played for 8 or more teams. So so that's the little stipulation. They have to have played for at least 8 or more teams, and they're going to be eligible for this draft. We have a list in front of us. We're going to try to draft the best team possible with these guys. Jay, how are you feeling about this list?
I'm feeling pretty good. I'm glad that you picked this topic because I feel like this gives us a chance, like you said, to really highlight some of the journeyman guys. And we have to remember, we always do our drafts for the prime versions of these guys. So there's a lot of guys that, although they might have been on a lot of teams, it might have just been based off longevity. A handful of these guys that we're going to name on this list were really good at the peak of their powers, and they were able to stick around in the league long enough to make it around the league as much as we're about to go talk about in terms of 8 to plus teams. So they should really be commended because it's not necessarily just being moved off because they're not good. I think if anything, they're actually being moved around from team to team because they've been able to stand the test of time. And I think that's really important to always highlight when you talk about these kind of guys.
100%. I mean, there's a reason why a lot of these guys have like 10 to 15-year plus careers. They don't do it for being scrubs. They actually contribute to their team. And we're going to be acknowledging them in this video, in this draft today. You know how this goes. Jay gets the first pick. I get the next 2. Serpentine style. He gets the next 2 after that, and so on and so forth. which means Jay, you get the first overall pick. I
Yeah,
think
man.
there's one obvious guy over here that you have to go with, but I think you can really choose between these two players. Who are you going to go with your number one?
So I was feeling frisky at first, but I got to be safe because I got to remember I always get the first overall pick. But if I pick up somebody wrong and slip up, you get 2 bites at the apple. So I'm gonna go
Yeah.
with BPA, and at the small forward position, I'm gonna go ahead and get Vince Carter out the way.
Interesting. Going Vince Carter. I was expecting you to go with the other guys. So the fact that you took Vince Carter, which I mean makes sense. You know his time in the Toronto Raptors, he was a lead top 10 player in the league for sure. But for my first overall pick, I got to go with this guy, one of the best rebounders of all time, one of the premier scorers in NBA history. Give me Moses Malone at the center position. I didn't even realize he played for this many teams, to be completely honest. But he bounced around a lot around the league at the end of his career, which I guess makes sense. I'm going to have him with my first overall pick. And then with my second overall pick, it's a very interesting choice because it's we don't have many like all-star guys left if you think about it. It's a
Mhm.
lot of good role players, but not a lot of great all-star level players left. This guy I'm going to choose next did not make an all-star team as well, but he definitely was in that conversation at his prime. Give me NBA analyst Richard Jefferson at the
Hmm.
small forward position. Let him
Okay.
go up against his former teammate Vince Carter. So let me have Richard Jefferson over there.
All right. So I get 2 back to back right now.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. This works out exactly how I wanted it to. So first, at the shooting guard position, I'm gonna put my boy Jerry Stackhouse, aka peak of powers was 29 ppg once upon a time.
Yes.
And then at the center position, give me my boy Tyson Chandler at the center
Oh,
spot.
I feel like Tyson Chandler slips into a lot of these drafts. Oh, I don't know. It feels like Tyson Chandler
Yeah.
like is always, but he's a damn good center. I think he's gonna be a decent matchup for Malone for sure. So those are some damn good picks. So you got yourself already Vince Carter, Tyson Chandler, and Jerry Stackhouse. Stackhouse I was definitely thinking of as well, but I decided to go with RJ over there for my next two picks. This should be interesting, huh? I think again, we're going with prime players. Give me Linsanity, Jeremy Lin. Prime being that stretch, of course, with him in the New York Knicks, him being almost a 20 and 10 guy, almost 10 assists per game. Give me Jeremy Lin, man. At his best, he was an absolute elite. Like he was like taking the league by storm, and I want him on my team. Give me him at the point guard position, and then I need a power forward and a shooting guard or some sort of way. I'm gonna go with the underrated legend. I think he had some like really good years back in the back in the 70s, and I think that he was a multiple time All Star too. Yeah, for sure. Give me Maurice Lucas. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm going with Maurice Lucas. At his prime, he was basically a 20 and 10 guy. He was a key player to the Portland Trailblazers when they won the championship in 1977. Key bucket. Like, I mean, he probably like is not a great shooter or anything, but he can score close to the rim. He has a good mid range jumper. Give me golden Maurice Lucas. He was a solid player back in the day.
That's definitely a deep cut, TV. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'd say that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let me see. So we got 2 more positions left. So we're gonna play a little bit smaller, but we're gonna get buckets around here. At my 4 spot, give me the aforementioned Jeff Green. So we big bouncy out here between Jeff
Okay.
Green and my boy Vince
Okay.
Carter. And then at the point guard position, man, you took insanity. That one hurt. At the point guard position, oh, give me we need somebody who can orchestrate all of this, but can also slow the young fellas down every now and then when things start to get paced. Give me Andre Miller at the point guard position.
Andre Miller. Oh wow. I mean, that's a damn good. I mean, underrated point guard, man.
Yeah.
Underrated point guard. One of the best assist guys in the league. Very crafty veteran. Well, he had didn't he have a 50-point game with the Timberwolves like in like the early 2010s or something?
Yeah, and he was Mr. Consistent with the Denver Nuggets for a little short period of time too, when they were that scrappy
Yeah.
team with Ty Lawson and Danilo Gallinari, Kenneth Faried. Like he's played in a
I
high
love
octane
that team.
offense before, you know what I mean? So he's
Yeah.
played in one of those environments before as the old veteran guy who can slow the ball down, but can also push the pace when need be. Andre Miller next to these guys, there's going to be a lot of young guns running up and down the floor, but he's a guy who can kind of keep them at bay, but also feed them when the time comes.
100%. That is a damn good pick. I have one more pick here, and I need to get my team a little bit tougher.
Okay.
I got a point guard. I got a finesse guy in Jeremy Lin. Of course, I got Maurice Lucas. We got some scores there with Moses Malone, and of course Richard Jefferson. We need a tone setter. We need someone to bring that bad boy sort of energy. Let me go with Stack. Let me go with Steven Jackson. Yes, he was one of the better. He was a pretty damn good defender back in his day, but multiple seasons with 20+ points per game. I mean, with the Charlotte Bobcats, with the We Believe Warriors back in the day as well. This guy was a bucket as well. He could play defense. He can shoot the basketball, get to the rim. He was a good player back in his day, and also could really set the tone, guard the best guy on the perimeter. I'm gonna be comfortable with that. Give me Steven Jackson with my final pick. I'm liking my team, bro. I'm liking my team. How you feeling?
I feel pretty good. I feel pretty good. Honestly, a handful of different names. TV, I always like these theme drafts where we kind of go away from the all NBA superstar guys. Of course, you sprinkle in a handful of dudes. Vince Carter, obviously, at the top. There's a handful of guys who are obviously effective on championship teams, but it's better. It feels a lot cooler when we're not picking at the same names all the time. And it's a lot cooler, too, when we're not always drafting current guys. We're kind of going back in the vault. This was one of those good ones.
100%. Jay, before we move on to the next topic, let me know who's your starting five for the best journeyman team.
So for the best journeyman team at the point guard position, I have Andre Miller as shooting guard. I've got Jerry Stackhouse at the 3 for small forward. I've got Vince Carter at the power forward position. I've got Jeff Green, and then rounding out the starting 5 at the center spot, I've got Tyson Chandler.
Very nice team. Very nice. Over here at point guard, give me Jeremy Lin, Linsanity at the point guard position. At the 2, give me Stack, Steven Jackson. Give me at small forward, Richard Jefferson. Power forward, Maurice Lucas. And at center, give me, hey, people forget it, top 20 player in my opinion all time, and Moses Malone over there rounding out the center position. We got some 2 teams here going face to face, which is pretty damn good. Let us know down below which team do you think is better. There's a lot of good other guys that we didn't mention. Quick fire. Who are some guys that you were thinking of choosing but didn't end up choosing?
Some guys that I didn't end up picking. That's a good one. Kevin Willis was one.
Yeah.
Jarrett Jack was one.
Ron Butler. I was thinking of Tough Juice for sure. Tough Juice was
Trevor Ariza, low key. Trevor Ariza and Matt Barnes are both 2 at the 3 spot. That if I hadn't already gotten Vince Carter out the gate, they would have been really good debates. I think Jerry Stackhouse is probably better than both of those guys offensively. Yeah. So that's why I leaned with him at my 2. But either one of those guys could have went at the 2 position as well. So yeah, probably either one of those 2 as well. Trevor Ariza and Matt Barnes got some real consideration.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of good players on this list. If we're missing anyone, to let us know down below. But now we have reached the final section of this podcast, the final segment, and we are back with the NBA quiz. This week we're not going to be doing the back and forth thing like we've done the previous weeks. We have some in the vault. Don't worry. We're going to be posting those on the TikTok very, very shortly. If you want to check those out, remember to follow Hit Your Free Throws over there if you want to see more of those. But for today, we're going to be going back to a more traditional quiz. And Jay, I'm going to be throwing you this question. Okay. I want to name me who has hit the most 3-point shots since the year 2010. Since the year 2010. So this removes, the Ray Allens of the world, the Reggie Millers that are always on the top of this list. I need you to give me the top 10.
The top 10?
Top 10 most threes.
Holy cow.
There's going to be some easy ones, but there's going to be some ones you might have to think a little bit more about.
Yeah, the easy ones are the ones I like, but the hard ones are where it gets they're going to be really. Okay, let's get some of the obvious, let's think 3-point shooters. So let's get Steph Curry.
That's number 1.
I know James Harden is up there in terms of 3-pointers made.
Number 2.
Klay Thompson.
That's number 4.
Okay. Gotta put Dame somewhere in there.
He's number 3. So you got the
Okay, we're
top 4 already. Okay, those are
cooking,
the ones I thought you were gonna
cooking.
get right away.
2010, 3-point shooters. JJ Redick.
He's on this list. He's number 8. Number 8 on this list, JJ Redick.
Okay,
No,
what about
7.
like
Number 7.
what about like Kyle Korver?
Kyle Korver is number 14 on this list.
Wow.
So
I guess it's more of an efficiency thing.
Yeah.
What about like Buddy Hield?
Number 11. Just missed out.
Oh my God, that's brutal, Mr. Buddy.
You know what sucks? He is only like if he's hit 3 more threes, he would have been number 10. If he hit 3 more threes.
Built like Clay, shoot like Steph. Shout out to Buddy. Oh, it's tough. What about?
There's a couple of like all NBA. There's a couple of all NBAers still here.
There's still some like big bodies here. Okay,
some big
dang.
bodies.
All right. What about like Paul George?
Paul George, number 6.
Okay, cool. We gotta think threes, man. Threes is where there's not gonna be any big men. That's what's helping me. I don't think there's gonna be any big guys on this list.
This guy's a borderline big, man. There's one guy that's a borderline big.
Borderline big?
He's tall as heck.
KD?
KD, number 10, right?
He's 10. Oh man, that's crazy. Okay.
2 3-pointers ahead of Buddy Hield. Dude.
Oh, that's brutal. Okay, that's the guy who's ahead of Buddy. See, okay, cool. Okay. What about like your boy Kyle Lowry?
Number 5, Kyle Lowry is over here on this list. I'm glad you got that one. The final 2 guys, they're role players for sure, but they are known for like jacking up a bunch of threes for sure.
Role players who are jacking up threes. Okay, that's tricky.
One of them had when he hit the 3, he definitely had a celebration to go with it.
J.R. Smith?
Nope, not quite. People associate the celebration more with a current NBA champion, but to be honest, this guy did it first. They associate this celebration with a current NBA champion, but I've seen this guy do it for longer, for sure.
Okay, so I'm going to start naming lower tier guys than who the guys we've already had, but I'm going to get lower on the tier list as we go. So, like, what about, like, CJ?
CJ is right behind Kyle Korver. I think he's 16 or 17.
Damn. Okay, what about somebody who, like, when he gets in the game, like, it's only up? So, like, Eric Gordon, maybe?
Number 9, Eric Gordon.
Cool.
9.
That's
so
my boy.
You're just missing number 8.
That's my boy.
Yeah, so you're missing number 8.
Clippers. Eric Gordon was a demon. Oh my gosh.
He was.
Was he the one with the celebration, or am I still missing the celebration guy?
You're missing the celebration guy.
What? Geez, because Trevor wasn't a celebrator. Patty Mills wasn't really a celebrator. Carmelo's a celebrator, but I don't think he's top 10, right?
He's not. No, he's not top 10.
No. LeBron's not top 10.
LeBron is actually number 14.
That's
which is funny.
So jacked up.
Number 14. This guy's I think he's kind of been a bit on the wayside, but back in the day, especially I'm gonna say he's most known for. Am I giving this away if I say this? He was like his days with the Trailblazers and probably trying to think of some other teams. The Mavs he was solid at. He was solid for the Pacers as well. Trying to remember other teams he played for, but the Trailblazers mainly is like the one like I think he is like the most solid.
So I already said Trevor. So the only other person I could think of that was shooting threes that I could even think of. Well, Trevor didn't play for the Mavericks either, I don't think. So what's that, like Wesley Matthews?
Wesley Matthews, number 8 on this list. not almost 2,000. Is it 1,800 threes since 2010? Wesley Matthews. The celebration I was referring to was a freaking bow and arrow one.
Oh, Jamal Murray. Okay.
Yeah, Jamal Murray. It's more associated with him, but to be honest, Wesley Matthews has been doing this for a long time now. So I would give respect to the OG for doing the celebration, but yeah, it is Wesley Matthews. Yeah. But yeah, those are the top 10: Steph Curry, James Harden, Damian Lillard, Klay Thompson, Kyle Lowry, Paul George, JJ Redick, Wesley Matthews, Eric Gordon, and Kevin Durant. Shout out to Buddy Hield. He can possibly do it by the end of this year. He can move into the top 10, but 2 behind Kevin Durant's kind of tough, which is really funny. But we'll have to wait and see. Yeah, so this is one of the most prototypical quiz. We got to go back to the basics sometimes over here. Let us know down below if you guys any other ideas for any sort of quiz or something like that we could do down the line. We are open to taking suggestions. But gee, we have reached another end of another fantastic episode. Thank you all for watching. What do you have to say to these beautiful people before we sign out?
Man, shout out to you guys for tuning in every single episode, man. We're going to get back to consistency after taking our little 2-week hiatus. Now I am in a different space. This has been a really big opportunity for me to expand the content, expand my situation is on top of it. So me and TV have a lot in store, both on the podcast and on the TikTok. I have some individual stuff coming on the Knockdown J page as well. So a lot to stay tuned for. The NBA season is coming a lot quicker than I think we all recognize. And I think that makes it even more exciting for all this content that's about to be coming out soon.
100%. Sooner rather than later, you guys are going to see some NBA preview stuff coming up soon. So be on the lookout for that as well. And of course, we're going to be giving you the weekly uploads for sure every week here on the YouTube and the podcast channels. And of course, look for the daily NBA content over there at Hit Your Free Throws. But yeah, this is the end of another episode. Thank you guys for watching again. Check out all our social medias at the Hit the Free Throws, our individual socials at the Knockdown J, at TVM Basketball. And make sure to support any of the podcast networks, the YouTube, all that good stuff. We really do appreciate all of you. But once again, this is the end of today's episode. Thank you all for watching. Hope you have a fantastic day. Take it easy, guys. Peace.